recondite, obdurate, invidious, memphitic or mephitic, concatenation, suzerainty, ineluctably. I had to look up these words in a dictionary from just one book, Anita Brookner's The Rules of Engagement, and I loved it. Hi, Booktube. I'm Marilyn, nickname Maya, and sometimes I'm called the baby boomer booktuber. Anyway, how many of these words did you not have to look up in the dictionary like I did? Let me just give you the meanings in case you're curious. Recondite means beyond ordinary knowledge or understanding, esoteric. Obdurate is unmoved by persuasion, pity, or tender feeling, stubborn, unyielding. Invidious is calculated to create ill will or resentment or give offense, hateful. Mephitic is noxious or poisonous. Concatenation is a series of interconnected or interdependent things or events. And I was working with that with the con is with. I was working with the prefixes, but I couldn't get that anyway. Suzerainty is the position of authority of a suzerain, a federal overlord, a feudal overlord. And ineluctably is an inescapable. Like I said, I looked them, these words all came, and many other what I call difficult words, from Anita Brookner's The Rules of Engagement. And I said I loved it. I'm talking about 3 books today, none of which are perfect books. But what is a perfect book? If you know, let me know. A perfect book is what's perfect to you, because everyone is different. And though this was not a perfect book to me, it was a book that made me think and made me realize that I want to read more of Anita Brookner. Let me just tell you a little bit about the book. The blurb to me is wrong. It says, in this masterly new novel, Anita Brookner gives us an exquisite story about how life choices can both reflect the past and direct the future, as she weaves an impeccably crafted tale of 2 women. And the 2 women are Elizabeth and Elizabeth, but one gets demoted to Betsy, and they know each other since childhood, and then they meet again in later life, but yet they're not close friends, but then they keep on popping up in each other's lives. But what I wanted to correct for you was, well, I think it's correct. It says here how our life choices can reflect the past and direct the future. And I think that it would be better explained by saying how the past directs our life choices and directs our life choices and reflects the past. So, in other words, when I'm saying that the past reflects our life choices, I mean that how we're brought up reflects how we're going to make choices in our life, and how those different choices are because of something, how we were brought up, or trauma that we had in our life. And this is very apparent in this book. And the main protagonist is Elizabeth. And Elizabeth was brought up in an unhappy childhood in England in the early 60s. It says in the beginning that the 60s kind of came to them at a little bit of a surprise, and they weren't really ready for it. So Elizabeth is a person who is very guarded. She's guarded, even with her friend Betsy. She doesn't really confide in her. And Betsy looks up, in the beginning at least, she looks up to this friend as someone who she wants to be with, because her childhood was very disruptive. Her mother died, her father was not available, and then he died, and then she was brought up with an aunt. So because of her past, she's looking for love, and that's what's guiding her through life. And Elizabeth, it comes from a unhappy family as well, but she's trying to hide her unhappy family and just try to get away. So it's a very interesting case study, a character study. There's a plot in this book, and I won't even, talk about it much, except to say that the plot is secondary to the character study. And the character study of both these women is so strong that sometimes it almost gets repetitive, but in a good way. There is a plot, and the plot is interesting, but what's more interesting is their inner thoughts about their lives and why they're acting in a certain way. Well, we don't really get much into Betsy's life, her inner life. We're getting into Betsy's inner life by the main character, Elizabeth. And one gets married, not for love, and that's Elizabeth. And Betsy searches for love, but yet they both come to sort of disastrous ends. And I heard about Anita Brookner from Sarah at Hardcover Hearts. And from what the conversation was going, it seems that Anita Brookner seems to write very, unhappy books about unhappy women, and they have unhappy pasts, or the endings are not happy. One of her books was Hotel de Luc, I think. I haven't read it. That's her most popular book, but she has quite a lot of books that I'm excited to read, even though they're not happy books. I find that the author here is trying to go deeply into these characters, and I almost felt like she was talking about herself, like the author was talking, like she was the main character here, because the details and the differences between the two characters are so defined that I felt that, I was living in her head, the author's head. And the hard words that I was talking about, difficulty words, is, she wasn't writing to dumb down her book, that's for sure. She didn't care. You had to keep up with her. And I loved that. And I loved that she was, thinking that her audience was as smart as she was, or making them smart, not dumbing it down. So I really love this book. I hope you read it. I recommend it highly. And it's called The Rules of Engagement. So that's how my vocabulary was raised by these 3 books. So my topic today is 3 books that blew me away, whether it's by vocabulary, language, or something that educated me about a topic that I didn't know a lot about. So when I say these books aren't perfect, I'm talking about from a writer's perspective or from a reader's perspective, that maybe in this book, maybe she could have made the language a little easier. I don't know. I don't think so. Or she could have not repeated the characteristics of each character so deeply. But it was perfect for me. So I'm giving it 5 stars. I thought 4.5, but no. It's perfect for me. It might not be perfect for everybody, but it was perfect for me. The next book I want to talk about, and I'm not going to talk about it in depth too much because it's a lot, and it's historical fiction. And the name of the book is Shadow of Berlin. And it's I don't read much historical fiction, especially about World War II. Now, it's not because of what a lot of people say. Oh, there's too much book. There's too many books about World War II. Not another book about World War II. But as the author, David R. Gillham, said in an interview, it's a pivotal time, that era, and what's happening in our present time has to do a lot with what happened in the past, and we're seeing the past repeat itself again. Okay, so what is this about? It's about a girl named Rashka. She's from Berlin, and she comes to Brooklyn, New York. She gets married, and she tries to live a normal New York City life with her new Brooklyn husband, but she's carrying a deep secret from her past. She was what they call a U-boater, trying to hide in plain sight in Nazi Berlin. And she has a lot of secrets, a lot of guilt, and it's not only survivor's guilt. But what the author was trying to do was to show how difficult it was for people to be assimilated after the war and just try to live a normal life when they went through so much tragedy, saw so much death. Yet this book is also about New York and the Yiddish language, which really delighted me because my grandmother spoke only Yiddish, as my grandfather did. And so this author, what's not perfect about this book, I think might be perfect to other readers who don't know any Yiddish or who don't know anything about life in Brooklyn in the 50s, which I was brought up in Brooklyn in the 50s. So this book was very familiar to me. I didn't need all the explanations that the author gave. For every Yiddish word that he used, he translated it. This is not popular in today's reading. I mean, we're expected to know Spanish and French and with no translation. And I admit it does make the book a little clunky at times and maybe a little YA, but believe me, this is not a YA historical fiction book. This book goes deep into character and language and Yiddishness and Jewishness and being an African American in that time as well. I mean, this author does it all, and he does it good. So if you're into historical fiction, and even if you're not, I recommend that you read David R. Gillham's Shadows of Berlin. So that's what I picked as a perfect historical fiction book, which might not be perfect because of what I said about him explaining everything. You know, he explained every Yiddish term. But, you know, not everybody knows Yiddish. Hardly anybody knows Yiddish. It's, you know, just coming back. It was almost a dead language. So I think that you'll appreciate all his explanations, not only about the language, but about the times. He brings up things that I almost forgot. Silver cup bread. I don't know if you know Wonder Bread, but silver cup bread was the bread in New York in the 50s. And he brings up so many name brands of things that really delighted me. And if you don't know them, you'll know it after you read this book. There's a really good plot twist in this book as well. And it's not all fun and games. There's a lot of tragedy in this book. But there's also, it's a wonderful book. Just read it. The next book I read for Pride Month. And this book was recommended to me by Kevvie at cestkevvie. And it's called, like I said, This Time for Me by Alexandra Billings. And it's about Scott, who transitions to be a trans woman, Alexandra, during a time when being a trans person was illegal, as she says in the book. This was not a perfect book, was not a perfect written memoir. But for me, it was perfect. It was a 5-star, and I'll tell you why. Because I learned so much. I really didn't know much about the trans experience. And of course, I don't know much, personally about the trans experience. But I learned from Alexandra Billings. Now, who is she? Okay, so Alexandra Billings is, like I said, she was brought up during, she was transitioned around 1980 during the AIDS crisis. In fact, she's an AIDS survivor. And she brings us from Scott to Alexandra as, into her life as a sex worker, as a performer. She impersonated Barbra Streisand and Liza Minnelli, then she became a teacher. She also became famous, and she was in the Amazon movie, or I don't know if it's a series. I haven't seen it. It's called Transparent, and she was like the first woman to be a trans performer, trans woman on Broadway. She's a singer. She's an activist. I mean, she's an amazing person, and we go along on this sometimes tragic, a lot of times tragic ride, but ultimately it's a survivor story, and as a memoir writer, I can say it's not a perfect book, but not because of the reasons that I read on Goodreads, where it got mixed reviews, and some said, like they say about all memoirs, it's self-indulgent, or it goes on and on. But this book needed to go on to teach us, what it's like, or what it was like, to be trans in a world that was so disdainful of people that didn't conform to what the standards of gender were and are still yet. And I think it taught me so much, and it taught me to do a little research and how to be a trans ally. And I just have a few little things that I learned by doing some research, and that's true in any situation. Don't tolerate disrespect. I remember when I lived in Minnesota, and there was a lot of racism, and because I present as a white woman, and I am Puerto Rican and have Asian children, I heard a lot of racism, and I was afraid to speak up. And that was bad, because when you don't speak up, you are becoming part of the problem. And so if you hear somebody talk bad about trans people or make fun, you have to speak up, just like you do about any kind of racism. And now that I'm older and not as scared, I do speak up. And ask somebody what their pronouns are, and don't assume that about somebody's gender without them telling you if they want to tell you. And don't worry about the bathroom thing. If there's no gender neutral bathroom, offer to take a person to the bathroom with you, if you have trans friends. I mean, these are things I learned. I mean, I don't know much, but I'm open to learning. I'm an older baby boomer, and so I'm in my 70s, but I can still learn. And so what's the why can't people younger than me be so not tolerable, not tolerating things, not tolerating people's choices or people's genders or anything, just be, tolerate. I wanted to mention now that Leobancraft, and I'm going to put down his information, has a tag, Stand with Trans Kids. And he's a wonderful booktuber and just a lovely person in general. He calls himself a trans dude, so I'll just repeat what he calls himself. And of course, Kevvie is a wonderful friend. So, okay, so, you know, to conclude my video, I just wanted to say that, you know, we all can learn. You know, I was a teacher, and I didn't know these words, and I'm not ashamed to say I didn't know these words. I looked them up in the dictionary, even though I told my students, look things up in the dictionary or try to figure it out by prefixes. Sometimes you have to look it up, and that's okay. And sometimes you have to learn things that you weren't familiar with. So anyway, that's all I have to say about these 3 books that blew me away. I hope you'll read them, because they're kind of out of my comfort zone, really. I don't read much historical fiction, and I don't, even though I write memoir, I don't read many memoirs, and I should. And literary fiction, you know, you are smart enough for this. We all are. So if it's not Anita Brookner, just read some classics, you know. Don't be scared by a big word, you know, because the more you learn more words, the more you'll feel comfortable reading books that are a little denser. And anyway, please subscribe to my channel. If you like this video, please hit the like button and comment. I love to hear your comments. And I will see you in the next video. So aloha.